Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be looking at a very interesting and unique novel that I haven't heard many people talk about at all, and that I'm very excited to get to talk about. Eugene Onegin by Alexander Pushkin. This is my most recent addition to my Russian literature library, and I think probably also my oldest, because if you know anything about Pushkin, he's kind of considered the grandfather of Russian literature. He was the basis for a lot of inspiration that Tolstoy drew on, probably Dostoevsky also, but he just came a whole generation, 2 generations before those guys. Uh, I believe this was published in the 1820s. I'm blanking on the exact year. I want to say 1825. That might be right. I'm not sure. But it was published a long time ago, before a lot of what many people consider the period of classic Russian literature. This came a good 60 years before all of that. Um, so, yeah. So, if you don't know much about Pushkin, like I said, he's kind of the grandfather of Russian literature in the sense that he just came before everybody else. But he didn't really write a whole lot of prose or a whole lot of novels. He mainly focused on poems. His poetry is very good, very famous, and it's what he's most noted for. However, he did attempt to branch out outside of poetry and try to write some prose, some novels, and that led to the creation of Eugene Onegin, which is kind of a gap, a bridge over that gap. It is a novel told in verse. This entire thing is completed in like 300 and might be 90, 350. It's 300 something. It's more than 350, but like 350 stanzas of rhyming prose. All of it rhymes, all of it is in prose and follows a consistent meter. And it tells a story. It's an extremely impressive work. And if you haven't heard of this before, as I hadn't until my girlfriend told me about it, I would highly recommend looking into it because it's just such an impressive and interesting piece of literature. And so I was made aware of it and naturally wanted to read it. So I checked it out and actually had a really good time with it. It was a lot of fun reading it. I mean, it's described as a novel in verse, but because it's in verse and it's kept like the meter is kept the same throughout all of it, it's kind of like an extremely long poem. But it's very good. The language is very good, the rhyming is very good, and the story is also interesting and rather juicy. Pushkin did a great job writing that and creating the basis for that. But I think another thing that needs to be said is just how good the translation is. I read the James Fallon translation from Oxford Classics, and it still keeps the meter and rhymes. Even though it was written in Russian and translated into English, this still reads like the classic Onegin stanza and rhymes in the same way that the Onegin stanza does. And I I took 3 semesters of Russian at my college, so I know how difficult it is to translate Russian and just how different of a language Russian is from English. And so the fact that you're able to translate 350 stanzas of not prose, 350 stanzas of verse into from Russian verse into English verse that keeps the same meter and rhyme, and being able to do that for all 350 stanzas while keeping the story intact is an incredibly impressive feat to me. I'm very impressed by this translation, almost as impressed as I am with Pushkin for writing this to begin with. James Fallon did an amazing job with this. I guess this is also a good opportunity to just talk about the printing. I really like this printing. This is my first Oxford classic that I have read. Well, I guess that's not true. I read, this is another Pushkin collection. I read his story Queen of Spades in this. This is also in Oxford. But these, I guess, are the only 2 Oxfords that I have. I plan to read War and Peace in an Oxford. I might have talked about that. I don't remember if I had. But after actually reading all the way through this Oxford edition, I definitely am going to do that. These are very well put together books. The cover is very nice and durable. The spine is durable. The spine doesn't break or crack. I know a lot of people that penguin spines crack, and some people like that, some people don't. But this one, you don't even have to worry about that. Like it doesn't crack at all. This is a pretty good spine. And the pages feel really nice on your hand. They're just the right thickness. The text is good. The ink is good. And then like it just has a nice amount of flop to it. It's not too floppy. It's not too sturdy. It just feels like a really good book to hold in your hand, especially once you've gone through the whole thing and you've flipped every page. It comes into its own. It feels like a new book in your hands. And I don't know. If you haven't picked up by now, I'm kind of a printing nut. And so I always like to give praise whenever I really like the printing. Not to mention, I think the cover design is really cool, and I like this white band that they have coming across here. But yeah, that's enough about the physical copy of the book and more of the greater ideas of like verse, stanzas, and translation. Let's talk into a little bit about a spoiler-free synopsis of what this book is like. So, like I said, it's told in like 350 plus stanzas of all rhyming and metered verse, and it tells the story through the specific stanza called the Onegin stanza, which Pushkin, you could say invented, but it's really just constructed. He constructed and wrote for this novel. All of the stanzas follow the same sort of like pattern. I forget it off the top of my head, but it's a very fun rhyming pattern, especially once you've read a few of the stanzas and you kind of know what to expect. It makes reading the rest of them fun when you've kind of like programmed that implicit pattern into your head. But he tells the story in a very good way. It's a very interesting story. It's about, it mainly follows this guy, Eugene Onegin, but it kind of follows him through his life and and a love endeavor that he has, or that kind of happens onto him, and tracks the apathy he feels towards this love plot and just his life in general, and how that can be detrimental, and then the consequences of waking up from that too late. It's a really interesting story. It's kind of simple, or maybe not simple, but it's not an incredibly complex story, which I'll get to when we get to the spoiler section, but it's still a good story, and I still enjoy it and think Pushkin told it well. But another really interesting thing he does with this book is Pushkin himself is a character in this. There's like an author of Eugene Onegin, who is one of Onegin's friends who is documenting this story, but that friend of Onegin is Pushkin himself. He himself is a self-insert in the book. And so if you've read Slaughterhouse-Five, which I have, and I have a video up on the channel talking about it, I feel like Kurt Vonnegut absolutely had to have read this book before he wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, because the first chapter of both books feels so similar, where Kurt Vonnegut is a character in Slaughterhouse-Five who is writing the story of Billy Pilgrim, and he was friends with Billy Pilgrim in the war and is writing down his story. That's like almost the exact same thing that happens with Pushkin and Eugene Onegin. Pushkin is like the whole first book is kind of Pushkin talking about his friend Onegin and giving some details about him and like where they live, and then kind of closes it out with like, I'm excited to document his story in here. I'm going to do it as best I can. And you're like, oh, this is practically a forced prologue where he's introducing you to what's going to happen as the author. He's introducing you to what's going to happen, who we're talking about, and the author's role in the story, which I thought was kind of funny. So this is like the probably not the very first instance of that, but I feel like I can track where a lot of books that do that get their inspiration from. It feels like good chance they get their inspiration from this. Yeah, I think that's about it for the spoiler-free section. That's about all I can say, because there's more I want to talk about, but that requires spoiling the books. So yeah, if you enjoy verse and you enjoy reading poetry, especially like rhymed and metered poetry, I would definitely recommend checking this out. It tells a great story through the medium of verse. It's just it's a very impressive book. So if you're looking for a good story, but if you're looking to be impressed, I would highly recommend this. So yeah, I guess now let's get into the spoiler section, talk about the plot of the book. It's a real simple plot, so I'll just lay it out right now. So Eugene Onegin is living off in the country, I believe, and then this new guy, none of his neighbors really like him, because he's grown apathy towards his life. He feels kind of bland about everything, every aspect of it. And then this new guy moves in near him. He becomes a new neighbor. This guy named Lenski, and Lenski kind of has the same apathy as Onegin, and so they become friends and they kind of bond over that. And then there's another house nearby that has these two sisters named Olga and Tatiana, and Onegin and uh, Lenski go over to this house and kind of befriend these girls, and like kind of to pursue them. And then Lenski and Olga start kind of flirting, and they become sort of a thing. And Onegin's like, if I were you, I would have gone for the older one, Tatiana. And little does Onegin know, Tatiana actually is taking interest in Onegin, and so she writes a letter to Onegin. And because you hear Onegin's previous thing of like, oh, I would have gone for her, when she sends Onegin this letter, you think, oh, they're gonna become a thing, and they're gonna have like a double date thing, like it's gonna be great. And then Onegin confronts her about the letter, and he's like, I just don't like. I feel like I would be a bad husband, bad boyfriend. Like you wouldn't. I would grow tired of you, and I don't want to grow tired. Like he pretty much just softly rejects her, or it might not be that soft. It's a little hard, but he kind of rejects her, saying like, it's really like it's a not you, it's me thing. He tries to tell her, he's like, I'm not fit to do this, and kind of like crushes her because she really did pour her heart out in this letter. And then time goes on, and I forget exactly why, but Onegin gets kind of annoyed at Lenski. There's a reason he does, and I'm blanking on it right now. But to get back at him, what he decides to do is Onegin decides to just kind of flirt with Olga a little bit, like dance with her a few times in a mazurka, and then Lenski notices this and gets kind of upset, and in a very quickly escalating turn of events, challenges him to a duel. And you read this and you're like, oh, okay, this is going up a notch. And so the two of them meet like the next day or in a few days, and they line up for their duel. And then Onegin shoots Lenski, and Lenski dies. Like Onegin just straight up kills Lenski in this duel, and then he feels a lot of remorse because A, he's killed somebody, and B, that somebody was like his only friend, and he misses he misses a friend like that, and now he's truly alone. And time passes. Like I think about 6 years pass, and Tatiana has moved to Moscow, and then Onegin also moves to Moscow after like 6 years for one reason or another, and is at some event, and then he notices Tatiana, and he thinks it's her, and then upon getting closer and asking somebody who that is, they're like, yeah, that's Tatiana. But the dude, he asks, like, who is that? That's her new husband. And of course, now that she's wedded off, Onegin wants her and is like, oh, I want you now, blah, 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 blah. And then I believe no, he doesn't write her a letter, I don't think. No, actually, he does write her a letter. He writes her a letter and then comes and visits her, and they have like this one-on-one talk, and he's basically begging, like, please, I'm sorry I was so apathetic back in the day, take me back. And then Tatiana stands strong. She's like, no, I've married a new husband. As much as I wanted you back in the day, you didn't want me. I moved on. I met this new man. He wants me. I'm staying loyal to him. I'm not leaving him for you. And Onegin is like devastated because he let his apathy of the past ruin something that could be good. And that is the end of the story. And Pushkin does this really funny thing after that happens. He spends the last like 4 or 5 stanzas wrapping it up as Pushkin. He's like, I had a lot of fun writing this novel, but it has to come to an end. Just as you, the reader, has to stop ending it, I, the writer, have to stop writing it. And it's hard for us both, but let's both pull away at the same time. It's pretty funny. A lot of this book is kind of funny, particularly the aspects with Pushkin. But yeah, that's a brief synopsis of the plot. Now that I've outlined a little bit of the plot, I think I want to talk about the two main characters, Onegin and Tatiana, and give each of them their flowers, then talk about a theme that I particularly like with this book. So Onegin, he's such a tragic character to me because it feels like nothing he can do is right. You know, he at the start of the book, he is so, like I keep saying, apathetic towards life. He feels no fire towards anything. And then he ends up doing nothing. He he doesn't really want to do anything. He has no passion for anything. And even when love finds him, he's like, I don't want that. And then the one time he does do something, duel with his friend, he ends up, or no, sorry, the duel isn't what he does. The one time he does something, flirt with Olga, as like a little spiteful thing. The one time he actually puts a little bit of passion and emotion into something, it leads to him killing his best friend and losing something that he didn't know he could lose. And it feels like no matter which direction he steps, something bad happens. If you do nothing, you feel nothing. But then if you take a step, you lose more than you would have if you had just stayed still. There's no option for him to gain or heal. Uh, he just feels like a very tragic character. Just everything, nothing going his way. He's just unlucky, I suppose. Unlucky with his feelings, you know. And that kind of ties into a theme that I want to talk about later with kind of having everything. He doesn't really have much to work for. Everything is kind of at his fingertips. He doesn't really have to. He doesn't really have to strive for anything. He is kind of born into some wealth, and so he doesn't really have to work a whole lot. He's able to attend a whole lot of balls and things like that's some aristocratic activity. He doesn't necessarily have to work extremely hard, and then he doesn't have to work very hard for love, as Tatiana just comes and mails the letter to him. He doesn't really have to work for anything. He gets a bit complacent with life, and when you don't have to work for anything, nothing feels great. And then by the time Onegin gains his fire back and he's back in Moscow and he actually has passion and wants to go after Tatiana, like, he can't have her. All is lost for him. He's wasted his good year, or maybe not good years, but he's wasted previous time and passed up on opportunities for the sake of apathy. And now that, like I said, he has his fire, there's nothing for him to take. And so it's just, no matter which step he takes, no matter which path he goes down, it always leads to a loss for Onegin. He feels like a very tragic character. And I guess now I want to talk about Tatiana herself, because I also think she's a very fascinating character. We get a lot of insight into her as she's waiting for Onegin to respond to her letter. She feels very realistic, just kind of trying to distract herself with little things. And when she is distracting herself, her view of the world is so like relatable. Like the imagery that she sees, the imagery conveyed through her view is so rich and very well done. And I also just really like how touching a lot of her moments are while she's just waiting. There's a time where she's kind of looking out a window waiting for Onegin to respond, and she just kind of writes like an E and O on the window while she's waiting, just like the EO for Eugene Onegin. I just thought that was a really touching moment. I like her character a lot. And then I also just love how unflinching of a character she is. How she doesn't cave to Onegin even in his most desperate moment. She shot her shot with him, and then he stomped on her practically. And then she moved on, and she was sad for a while, very sad. But then she moved on, and she just did what she did. She found a new husband, and she was happy with him. And then when Onegin came back and was like, "I want you," she, like I said, unflinching, didn't cave to his whim, his desire, was like, "No, you passed up on me. I'm not taking you back now. I'm loyal. I'm proud of my loyalty to my husband. I'm not compromising that." And I think that's a very admirable character trait to make her have. I really like that about her, how unflinching she is. She's like she's the highest ground in the story, and I like that. And then the last thing I want to talk about is a theme I really like that I picked up in this, the theme of like forbidden fruit, wanting what you can't have. And I want to read one of the, it's not one of the last stanzas, but it's pretty close to the end, and it's one of my favorites. And I guess this will give you an example of what an Onegin stanza sounds like, but it goes on. But my Eugene all evening heeded Tatiana, only her alone, but not the timid maid who'd pleaded, that poor enamored girl he'd known. But this school princess so resplendent, this distant goddess so transcendent, who ruled the queenly Neva's shore. Alas, we humans all ignore our Mother Eve's disastrous history. What's given to us ever palls. Incessantly the serpent calls and lures us to the tree of mystery. We've got to have forbidden fruit, or Eden's joys for us are moot. I really like those last two lines. The needing to have forbidden fruit, or else everything else in the Garden of Eden in the world is it doesn't matter, or it doesn't feel quite as rich. And I feel like I mentioned it briefly, but going back to Eugene, I think that's what he suffers from. Back previously, he didn't have to work for anything. There was nothing forbidden to him. Everything was at his disposal. He could have had everything: money, leisure, love. Everything was there. He didn't have to work for anything. There was nothing forbidden, nothing he had to strive for. And because there was nothing he had to strive for, he had no fire. He had no passion, and everything around him was gloom. He didn't really care about much of anything, and didn't have a drive to do anything because nothing was forbidden. He was at the top of the mountain. He had everything. But then now that he is now gone to Moscow, and realizes he wants Tatiana, and realizes that she's married and that he can't quite have her, even after directly going to her and asking her, and her still denying him, saying he can't have her. It kind of brings this fire back to Onegin. As tragic as it is that he can't be connected with the person he wants. Not that he deserves that. He lost his chance. But the fact that that she is this new forbidden fruit, the first thing that he can't really have, the first thing he wants that he can't have, it's kind of ignited this fire in him. It's brightened up all the joys of Eden around him, because before that they were all like the stanza said, it was all moot. He didn't nothing really had a whole lot of color to him because he could have everything. And I just think that's a really interesting theme to portray. And just I like how long it took Pushkin to play out that theme. You know, like that was practically spanning cover to cover. Like, he started the book with Eugene's complacency, and then ended it with him begging for Tatiana. They call her Tanya sometimes. Tatiana to take him back, and her saying, "No, you can't have me. Like, I'm the forbidden fruit now. Like, you can't have me." That was a practically cover to cover arc, and I think it's a great way to tell that story. Pushkin just took most of this novel to lay out that theme, and I think it was a great way to go about that. It ties in. There are things that work towards this theme that you didn't even realize worked towards the theme until you were aware of it, and you're not really aware of it until you hear that Eden and forbidden fruit line, and it kind of connects a whole lot of stuff that you didn't know needed connecting. I just thought it was really well done. But yeah, that's Eugene Onegin. I really liked this. I thought this was a very fun read, a very enjoyable read. Especially if you haven't checked out much poetry in general, like myself. I'm not a huge poetry fan. I mean, that's not accurate. I like poetry. I think I prefer prose to poetry, and so I read a whole lot more prose. I don't read a whole lot of poetry. But as somebody who doesn't read poetry, this was a very nice refresher. I enjoyed this a lot, and I think if you don't necessarily gravitate towards poetry, I would also recommend giving this a shot, because I think this is just it shows you a lot of the talent that poets have. Poets like Pushkin and James Fallon. They're very talented, and it shows that a story doesn't absolutely need prose to be woven. You can weave a story with poetry, and when that can be done through poetry without the assistance of prose, it makes the story, even though it's a rather rudimentary story, it makes the story so impressive. And I just like to be impressed. It's always fun to come across a book that wows you. You know, because the more and more you read, the more and more you consume, the harder and harder it feels to get wowed. And so it's always nice to come across something that makes you kind of take a step back and think, wow, this is really impressive. But yeah, if you're at all interested in Eugene Onegin, I would highly recommend it, and I would highly recommend this edition and this translation, the Oxford Classic with James Fallon. It's very good. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for me today. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you like and subscribe. If you've read Eugene Onegin and want to talk about it, feel free to leave a comment. Love to hear what you have to say. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for me. See y'all.